She called the cops on me for trespassing at my own house. I'd just spent 6 weeks saving forests, but apparently that didn't matter to Deborah Crimble, self-appointed sheriff of the sidewalk I came home to rest. She came to live stream my arrest. She had no clues. She just picked a fight with the wrong government employee. Quick question. Anyone else watching this while hiding from their HOA president, drop your location in the comments. I'm curious how far this insanity spreads. I hadn't even shifted into park before I saw the flashing lights, 3 patrol cars deep, with Deborah pacing like a game show host about to reveal who's going to federal prison for mulching without a permit. She had her phone out, pointed straight at me, narrating like this was a National Geographic special. "Behold, the return of the deep state squatter," she screeched. And honestly, if stupidity were a broadcast network, Deborah would have a primetime slot. I was still wearing my wildfire gear, boots crusted in ash, looking like a rejected chimney sweep, while Officer Davis approached my truck with the caution of a man who'd just watched a Karen compilation during lunch. "Sir, we've received a report of property impersonation," he said, barely suppressing the sigh crawling up his throat. Deborah shoved a manila folder between us like she was handing over classified nuclear codes. "This man abandoned his home for 42 days, according to HOA Rule 47B that makes it communal territory. Her proof was a half-blurry Google Maps printout, a forged electric bill with her name duct-taped onto it, and a sticky note that said, 'He looks shifty.'" I showed my federal ID, wildfire deployment letter, and driver's license, all while Deborah zoomed in on my face, hissing to her followers, "Notice the eyes. Classic deception pupil spread." Just when I thought the circus had peaked, my neighbor Maria came marching across the lawn with the kind of energy only found in retired women with no patience and too much iced tea. "Ay Dios mío, what are you doing now, you crazy bag of croutons?" she said, waving my spare house key like it was the Constitution. "I watered his plants, I took in his mail. You've been sending him fines every week, you taco list terrorist." Deborah didn't flinch, just turned her phone and whispered, "She's been compromised." I would have laughed, but I was too tired to blink. Officer Davis handed me back my ID with a look that said, "Sir, I'm sorry for everything, including being alive right now," and began to walk away. But Deborah wasn't done. She yanked out a second folder, thicker than her foundation layer, and yelled, "I have proof he's a fake agent. He's a lawn spy." Inside, printouts from conspiracy forums, a close-up of my recycling bin, and a page labeled "How to Spot a Government Clone," with items like "Suspicious Elbow Angle" and "Mows in Straight Lines." One of the officers legit snorted and turned around to hide his laughter. "Ma'am," Davis muttered, "we've verified him. There's no crime here." Deborah gasped, like someone told her target discontinued seasonal flags. Then she turned to me, face twitching like a microwave on its last beep, and whispered, "You may have fooled them, but I know what you are." Her pupils looked like they were about to file HOA violations of their own. I just nodded, pulled my duffel out of the truck, and said nothing, because when you've been sleeping in fire trucks for 6 weeks, there's nothing quite as exhausting as suburban warfare, and if you think that was the end, you must be new here. Deborah was just preheating what would you do if your neighbor tried to repossess your house for having suspicious elbow angles. Drop your craziest HOA moment in the comments. And don't miss next part, because Deborah's about to call the FBI on my garden shed. Deborah once claimed my wheelbarrow was signaling the Russians. Now she's sure my shed houses weapons. Spoiler, it holds rakes, not rockets. It started at 6:43 a.m. on a Saturday, which in suburban warfare time is the equivalent of a pre-dawn missile strike. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I heard the sound of tires screeching and a loud voice yelling, "This is a federal emergency. Step away from the tool shed." I looked out the window to see Deborah in full camo, no joke, camouflage cargo pants, a utility vest with 0 utilities, and a red headband that screamed "Last Place Mall Ninja." Behind her, a SWAT van rolled up, like I was storing WMDs under my tomato cages. My crime? Having a pattern of long, narrow objects visible through my shed window. They were rakes, but to Deborah, they were shoulder-fired doomsday devices. The police poured out like this was the finale of a cop show, taking tactical positions around my roses. Officer Davis, already familiar with Deborah's hobby, approached me like a man begging to be abducted by aliens just to escape HOA jurisdiction. "Sir," he sighed, "we have to clear the area. The caller reported multiple firearms stored improperly." "She's referring to my shovel," I replied, holding it up with 2 fingers like it might go off. That's when one of the officers keyed his radio. "Confirming visual. Subject has 1 rake, 1 shovel, 1 bag of—" "Scott's Turf Builders, sir." Deborah gasped like someone had just insulted her at a church potluck. But the best moment came when the SWAT team breached the shed. 6 officers stacked up like they were entering a cartel safe house, kicked in the door, and were immediately assaulted by the smell of expired fertilizer and cobwebs. "Area secure," one of them muttered, stepping over a bag of mulch and my grandfather's rusted hedge clippers. Deborah stood there, clutching her phone like it was the nuclear football. "Check for hidden compartments. That's where they hide the spy equipment," she bellowed. At this point, even the SWAT captain looked like he was going to Google early retirement. Once the all clear was given, Davis walked over with the expression of a man who'd seen too much grass and not enough common sense. "Sir, we apologize. Again, we're going to make a note in the system to flag these calls as non-critical," he said, pausing, as Deborah attempted to wrestle the rake from one of the officers while shouting, "This tool is a threat to democracy." The officer held it above her reach like she was a toddler at nap time. "Tony does it." "Please," he called. "It's the only tool that will help at this point." That might have been the end of it, but this is Deborah we're talking about. Later that afternoon, she handed out flyers titled Rake's End, the radical agenda, and announced a full community tribunal to decide whether I posed a danger to local order. Lesson learned. You can't reason with someone who thinks Miracle-Gro is chemical warfare, and apparently you can't keep gardening tools without being labeled a domestic threat. I tried to ignore her, but Deborah's tribunal came with a PowerPoint, a Facebook event page, and a petition signed entirely by her, her cat, and 2 suspiciously similar names that looked a lot like D. Crimble. And lucky me, I was the guest of dishonor. What would you do if your shed was raided over a shovel? Drop your funniest HOA confrontation below. And don't miss, because Deborah's PowerPoint is about to be national news. Deborah's HOA meetings start with the Pledge of Allegiance, a smoke machine, and 3 choruses of She's a Grand Old Flag. I knew I was in trouble the second I saw her roll in a portable speaker wearing a sash that read Neighborhood Defender and a headset mic like she was hosting the Super Bowl of paranoia. She even made Bob dim the lights and cue up a PowerPoint presentation titled Operation Compost Deception, How One Man Infiltrated Our HOA. Let me tell you, if PowerPoint abuse were a crime, Deborah would have been doing 20 to life. Slide 1 was my face, zoomed in so tight you could see the stress pimple I earned during fire season. "This man," she declared, "owns a compost bin that smells too natural." Slide 2 was a blurry photo of me putting out my garbage cans with the caption, "Non-regulation trash can position equals lawlessness." By slide 14, she was accusing me of storing subversive literature in my mailbox, which was just a copy of Better Homes and Gardens. Reads magazines about modifying property. "You connect the dots," she yelled, and somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Lady, it's mulch, not mutiny." The crowd of 30, mostly neighbors lured in by the promise of free cookies, sat with jaws unhinged as Deborah clicked through slides of alleged evidence. There was a sock she found on my porch, labeled non-high ISU'd mail retrieval sock, a screenshot of me watering my basil, possible hydroplot, and a whole slide dedicated to the known dangers of zucchini. She even played a clip of me sneezing into my elbow and shouted, "See, secret signal." To her credit, the slide transitions were dramatic. Exploding stars and wipe effects, like she was directing a Michael Bay film about HOA drama. Just as I was preparing to fake a phone call and escape, Bob, her long-suffering husband, stood up to adjust the thermostat and accidentally unplugged the projector. The screen blinked black and Deborah gasped like someone had pulled the fire alarm at her imaginary FBI graduation. "Robert, reconnect the patriotic slide deck immediately," she shouted, but Bob just mumbled something about needing air and stumbled toward the back, clearly regretting his entire marital portfolio. That's when he muttered it, barely loud enough to hear but impossible to ignore. "Not another Three Queens disaster, Debra." I froze. Deborah froze. The room froze. Even the snack table seemed to lean in. "Robert, you swore we'd never speak of that," Deborah hissed, her voice cracking like cheap patio furniture. But it was too late. The seed was planted. Maria raised an eyebrow so high it could have joined NASA, and I tucked the phrase "Three Queens" deep into my mental pocket. Something told me this poker reference wasn't about cards. It was about the jackpot of crazy I'd just been dealt. Ever been accused of national subversion over a zucchini? Deborah's HOA meetings start with the Pledge of Allegiance, a fog machine from Party City, and 3 off-key rounds of "She's a Grand Old Flag," all sung by Deborah herself, who's more pitchfork than pitch perfect. She wore a red pantsuit that screamed dictator at a bake sale and had Bob lug in a projector like it was the nuclear football. She tapped her mic with unnecessary aggression and said, "Let's begin the exposing. Slide 1, my face. Slide 2, my compost bin. Slide 3, a close-up of my sock drawer somehow. I don't even know how she got that photo." Her PowerPoint was titled Operation Suburb Cleanse, but it may as well have been The Time I Lost My Grip on Reality, a visual album. She accused me of zoning violations for leaving my hose coiled the wrong way, mailbox disrespect for using non-HO-endorsed stamps, and possible espionage because I read Better Homes and Gardens in the front yard. "Notice the posture? He's clearly signaling with his elbow," he declared. "Like I was auditioning for a secret Basil cult." Someone in the back coughed out a laugh, and Deborah whipped around like she was going to banish them to non-compliance purgatory. I tried to leave, but then came slide 67. Known contraband on Mitch's premises. The list included 1. A suspiciously large zucchini, 2. A sock with a hole used for evasion, and 3. A compost bin that smells too organic. Deborah had highlighted the words "suspicious decay" like it was a Cold War memo. "This man is growing things that cannot be accounted for," she bellowed while patriotic music played in the background. I looked around at my neighbors, half horrified, half chewing popcorn like this was courtroom reality TV. Maria whispered, "If she says aliens, I'm throwing my empanada." Then came the glorious accident. Bob shuffled toward the outlet with the grace of a man who'd rather be anywhere else, including a dentist office during an earthquake, and tripped on the extension cord. The projector blinked off. Chaos. Deborah screeched, "You've sabotaged the truth, Robert!" And that's when it happened. He mumbled under his breath, just loud enough for the room to catch. "Not another Three Queens disaster, Deborah." The oxygen left the room. My brain snapped to attention like a border collie hearing the word treat. Ed's eyes flared. "Robert, you promised never to mention that," she barked, but it was too late. The neighbors were locked in. Maria was already whispering translations to the Spanish-speaking couple next to her. I didn't know what Three Queens meant yet, but my gut knew it was juicy, and judging by Deborah's meltdown, potentially devastating. Give someone a PowerPoint and they'll declare martial law on zucchini. Give them a stage and they'll try to rewrite the Constitution on scented printer paper. What family secret could be so big, Deborah? Rather be known as a rake raider than admit it. Drop your wildest guess below, and don't miss where poker night meets a 70-year lie. You know you've hit a nerve when a woman in a red blazer screams about 1,950 S-land theft while standing on a trampoline. That's exactly what Deborah did the next morning, bouncing slightly, yelling, "They took our ranch at gunpoint!" while her American flag scarf got tangled in her hair like Liberty itself was tired of being dragged into her nonsense. Apparently, Bob's poker slip-up triggered a meltdown so nuclear she needed vertical momentum to process it. She went door to door with a manila folder labeled Historical Government Land Theft Verified, which contained 3 Wikipedia printouts, 2 blurry photos of tumbleweeds, and a hand-drawn map that looked like it was sketched during a Red Lobster lunch rush. "My grandfather built that ranch with his bare hands until the government ripped it away," she cried to anyone who dared open their door. Meanwhile, Maria watched from her porch, with arms crossed and that grandmotherly smirk that says, "I know more than you," And I bake better, too. At sundown, Maria waved me over and pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping like it was a trump card in a family soap opera. "Mijo," she said, patting the bench beside her. "It wasn't the government, it was cards." She unfolded the article. "Ranch lost in high-stakes poker showdown, 4 queens folded." There he was, Deborah's grandfather, Harold P. Krimble, looking like a man who'd just bet his legacy on a bluff and lost to a guy named Carl with 2 aces and a killer mustache. Had the winning hand, Mitch, but he got spooked. Folded, told everyone the feds took it, so he didn't have to admit he gambled away the land. I sat there in stunned silence while Maria handed me a photo of a younger her in a silver dollar casino apron. I was there, I was 17, he screamed conspiracy before they even shuffled again. I mean, 4 queens? The man threw away a royal welcome mat and handed Deborah a delusion wrapped in the American flag. No wonder she'd built a personality around HOA power. Her family tree was rooted in denial and blackjack regret. Now I had the truth, but I didn't need to use it, not yet. Deborah was still digging her own trench, publicly, enthusiastically, and on live streams. And while she screamed about stolen ranches, conspiracy cartographers, and deep state dandelions, she didn't notice the real government paying attention. Because when you file 47 federal complaints, yell SWAT on every HOA email thread, and call SWAT on a shovel, you get flagged. And when you get flagged, envelopes start arriving. A lie can last 70 years. Especially if it's laminated, framed, and screamed on a trampoline by someone wearing a Freedom fanny pack. If you found out your neighbor's entire identity was built on a folded poker hand, would you tell them or let them self-destruct in high definition? Deborah danced on her lawn when she got the federal letter, in pink heels, to gospel music, holding a megaphone. She screamed, "Justice has arrived, patriots!" like the Constitution had personally RSVP'd. She waved the envelope like it was a golden ticket to vindication, not realizing she was about to walk into the Wonka factory of public accountability. Minus the chocolate, plus subpoenas. The letter was embossed, sealed, and terrifying to anyone with an ounce of guilt, so naturally, Deborah saw it as a compliment. "I'm being recognized for my service to the neighborhood," she told Bob, who'd already started packing a suitcase just in case witness protection became relevant. She live-streamed herself reading the invitation with tears in her eyes and gospel choir music blaring in the background, while Maria casually sipped horchata next door and whispered, "Oh, sweet baby Jesus, she really thinks it's an award." For 2 straight days, Deborah prepared like it was prom night at the Pentagon. She bought a new suit, hot pink, naturally, had her nails done in red, white, and blue, and added a tiara that said Truth Warrior. She rehearsed a speech so loud, half the neighborhood learned it by osmosis. "I'd like to thank the brave whistleblowers, the U2 patriots, and the creators of PowerPoint for making this day possible," she cried into her reflection. Bob wore all black, looking less like a supportive spouse and more like a man headed to a sentencing. The day of the ceremony, Deborah arrived at the federal building 90 minutes early, demanded front row seating, and asked for a microphone test in case there's a standing ovation. Her live stream was already titled, "The Day They Crowned Me HOA Queen." I showed up in a simple button-down and a side smile because I already knew what was waiting behind that curtain. A banner. A beautiful, federally approved banner that was going to rip the stage right out from under her. Then the lights dimmed. The federal prosecutor stepped forward with the tone of a man whose soul had been dulled by years of tax fraud cases and public delusion. "We'd like to thank Mrs. Deborah Krimble," he said. Deborah beamed. "Without her, we wouldn't have such a clear case to present today." That's when the curtain rose and the banner unfurled in all its bold bureaucratic glory. Federal hearing, abuse of power and false reporting. The case of Deborah Krimble versus reality. Be careful what you live stream, it might just end up as Exhibit A, complete with time codes, emojis, and a laugh track provided by the internet. What happens when your own PowerPoint presentation becomes federal evidence? Nothing says downfall like your own slideshow played back with dramatic music in a government building. The lights dimmed, the projector whirred, and there it was, Deborah's legacy, set to the score of her own delusions. The opening slide read, Operation HOA Purge, Episode 94, complete with glitter fonts and 3D fire effects. Even the prosecutor looked confused, as if he'd accidentally wandered into a digital scrapbook curated by a suburban vigilante with a megaphone and unresolved trauma. Exhibit A, he announced. Click. The footage showed Deborah lighting my cease and desist letter on fire while chanting, "Fake law can't burn real truth." Cut to her chasing a squirrel around the neighborhood with a broom, yelling, "It's wearing a wire, I swear." Laughter rippled through the room, except from Deborah, who sat stone-faced like a politician who just found out the mic was still hot. Bob looked like he wanted to melt into the floor, clutching his jacket like it contained either secrets or an exit plan. Slide after slide painted the full HOA horror show. Deborah screaming into her phone that I was smuggling fertilizer across property lines, her dramatic reenactments of my alleged crimes, complete with props, and my personal favorite, a blurry photo of me sneezing, annotated with chemical signal in red Sharpie. The internet is forever, the prosecutor reminded us, and apparently so is episode 57, where Mrs. Krimble claimed her mailbox was vibrating with deep state frequency. By minute 12, someone in the back snorted so hard they had to excuse themselves. Then the prosecutor turned toward Bob. "And now, we ask, what fuels this level of obsession?" Bob shifted in his seat, gulped, and stood up like a man walking the Green Mile in orthopedic loafers. "I can't keep quiet any more," he croaked. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a faded envelope, its edges worn like it had been carried through guilt and 2 divorces. "This is Harold Krimble's real suicide note, not the fake one Deborah's family framed in the hallway under the plaque that says, 'Government took everything.'" Deborah gasped. "Robert, you promised never to open that letter," she shrieked, clutching her pearls like she'd just seen someone double park on Constitution Avenue. But Bob didn't flinch. He handed the envelope to the prosecutor with trembling fingers and sat back down like he'd just dropped a nuke made of paper. The internet never forgets, but guilt's got a longer memory, especially when it's stuffed in your jacket pocket for 3 decades waiting to scream surprise. What could be so damning in that letter? It unravels a whole family myth. If truth were whiskey, Bob just uncorked a bottle labeled "My marriage was a lie," and it burned all the way down. The courtroom went silent as the prosecutor unfolded Harold Krimble's real suicide note like it was the final chapter in a decades-long soap opera. It was handwritten, shaky, and tragically clear. "I lost the land fair and square. Folded 4 queens like a fool, told my family the feds stole it 'cause I couldn't face them. Tell the truth someday if you can." Bob nodded solemnly, then pulled out a second flask. His posture said freedom, his eyes said divorce lawyer, and his mouth said nothing, for once. Deborah let out a sound that can only be described as a cross between a kettle boiling and a tornado siren having an identity crisis. No, this is a deep fake," she shrieked, eyes darting like a squirrel on an energy drink. She lunged for the podium, slipped on her own glitter heel, and still managed to scream. "They altered the letter using satellite frequencies." Somewhere in the back, Maria muttered, "Dios mío." The woman finally popped. A marshal reached for his cuffs. A nearby car alarm went off. Coincidence? Maybe. Deborah screamed like she caused it with her mind. The prosecutor read the rest of the letter aloud while Deborah spun in place, yelling about mind control and suspicious blackjack tables. "A winning hand means nothing if you fold," he said, "and generations of damage can start with one man's shame." You could see neighbors connecting dots like it was conspiracy bingo night. The poker story explained everything. The bitterness, the paranoia, the laminated HOA rules printed in 24-point Comic Sans. Harold Krimble didn't just lose land, he started a mythology, and Deborah made it a lifestyle. Then came the handcuffs. Officer Davis, looking like a man who'd just finished a very long novel titled The HOA Chronicles, Volume Psychotic, gently took Deborah's arms. "Mrs. Krimble, "You're under arrest for harassment, filing false reports, and misuse of federal resources," he said, reading the charges with the grace of someone who'd practiced this on the drive over. Deborah shouted, "You're all traitors! My house talks to satellites and they'll back me up!" As her live stream continued to roll, within minutes, someone in the chat typed, "Yo, she's trending." As they led her away, Deborah turned back and hissed, "You haven't seen the last of me, Mitch. I left something behind." Then she winked. Not a friendly wink. The kind of wink that says, "I buried a thumb drive and a raccoon has the map." The whole room paused. Because when someone like Deborah leaves something behind, you double-check your fire alarms and your shrubbery. A winning hand means nothing if you fold out of fear. Or worse, build an entire HOA dictatorship to cover it up for 70 years. What did Deborah leave behind that made her wink like a cartoon villain? Find out, in part, because the truth may be buried, but it's wearing a tiara and holding a USB drive. 6 months later, Deborah was wearing the same pink suit, but instead of marching into federal hearings, she was bagging groceries and asking, "Did you keep the receipt for your choices?" Her tiara had been replaced by a name tag that read, "Debbie Trainee," and her voice had downgraded from courtroom soprano to aisle 5 mezzo reek. I ran into her at the returns counter one Tuesday. She smiled, not the tight, HOA weaponized kind, a real one, slightly cracked at the edges like ceramic that'd been through the dishwasher of life. Turns out Deborah was court-ordered to attend something called HOA Behavior Reassignment and Humility Training, which, according to Maria, was mostly group therapy and trust falls into inflatable pools of paperwork. But the real twist came by mail. One morning, I opened my mailbox, and out fell a letter with glitter glue stars and the faint scent of store-brand lavender soap. Inside was a photo of Deborah holding a 6-month sobriety chip under a banner that read, "Admitting you're wrong is harder than poker." She looked calm, unarmed, and, brace yourself, kind of proud. The letter read, "Mitch, you were right. I folded my life like Grandpa folded those queens. I just wanted to matter. But I mattered in all the wrong ways. I'm learning new rules now, and I finally got my first real job, where they pay me to listen instead of yell." Maria framed it, said it was the first useful HOA document Deborah ever produced. Bob, meanwhile, remarried a therapist he met during Deborah's trial. They now host a monthly poker night, and the only rule is, don't fold queens, and no PowerPoint presentations allowed. The neighborhood? It healed, slowly. The HOA bylaws went from 147 pages to 2 sticky notes, "Don't be a jerk," and "No more meetings with soundtracks." The monthly HOA complaints turned into potlucks. People laughed again. We even named a flower bed in Deborah's honor, the Redemption Rose Patch. Because if someone like her could turn the HOA Titanic around, maybe there's hope for the whole ship. Revenge is sweet, but redemption with a side of humility? That's the real jackpot, especially when it comes with coupons and emotional growth. Her grandfather folded 4 queens. She nearly folded the whole neighborhood, but sometimes even Karens can change. If the lesson's loud enough to go viral, would you forgive your worst neighbor if they actually tried to change? Drop your answer in the comments, because somewhere, a Deborah's rewatching her courtroom clip and learning how to use a barcode scanner. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. Let's laugh at the madness together, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story.